Good morning, everybody. It is absolutely awesome to actually be here with everybody live for the first time since I can remember. I don't know, the last time, this was probably 2 years ago, that we were collectively in the same space. It is amazing to know what has transpired over the course of the last 18 months. March 13th was a day that I don't think any of us will ever forget. The work that's been done since that point in time has made me probably the most proud superintendent on planet Earth. I cannot express to you the gratitude I have for what it is that you've accomplished over the course of the last 18 months. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. When we started this past September, I had absolutely no idea what to expect for this upcoming school year. We have been through so much, socially, emotionally, politically, physically. The amount of struggle, the amount of strife that we have endured over the course of an 18-month stretch was more than I could ever possibly imagine a school district enduring. And yet, we showed up in September. We did what it is that we needed to do in order to be able to support kids academically. Kids are learning, kids are back, they're connected. I've had a chance to get into classrooms. It is absolutely profound to see what it is that's going on inside classrooms right now. The amount of social connections that kids have is way more than I could have ever imagined. It's absolutely amazing. Bringing back all the traditions, whether or not it's sports, the fine arts. This past Saturday, we had our first ever Safe Halloween. We had thousands of kids from around the community coming in, and our high school students and our staff supported them in a Safe Halloween trick-or-treating event that was absolutely amazing. I just wanted to thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart for what it is that you've done over the course of the last 18 months. And most recently, these last few months, getting this school year back on track. You guys are absolutely heroes. You know how much I love you. You know how much I care for you. And I just wanted to say thank you absolutely for everything that you've done. So very excited. Put on my eyes. To welcome, I can't see. These are actually Jen's. I forgot my glasses. You really can't see, Jen. I want to welcome a very special guest, somebody that many of you are very familiar with, Mr. Mark Brackett, Dr. Mark Brackett. Read a quick bio and then bring Mark up here. He is the star of today's show. Mark Brackett is the founder and director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a professor in the Child Studies Center of Yale University. He is the lead developer of Ruler, an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning that has been adopted by nearly 2,000 pre-K through high schools across the United States and in other countries, including right here in Farmingdale. He serves on the board of directors for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. As a researcher for over 20 years, Mark is focused on the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in learning, decision-making, creativity, relationships, health, and performance. He has published 125 scholarly articles and received numerous awards and accolades for his work in the area. He also consults regularly with corporations such as Facebook, Microsoft, and Google on integrating the principles of emotional intelligence into employee training and product design. Most recently, he co-founded OG Life Lab, a corporate learning firm that develops innovative digital learning systems on emotional intelligence. Brackett's mission is to educate the world about the value of emotions and the skills associated with using them wisely. I want everyone to become an emotional scientist, Mark says. We need to be curious explorers of our own and others' emotions so they can help us achieve our goals and improve our lives. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome up Mr. Mark Brackett. Oh, I'm asking. All right. Do I dare ask you how you're feeling? I realize that I'm in the wrong career right now. This is all about the time of suppressing and repressing our feelings, right? About to say no.
Firstly, thanks for the warm introduction. I'm really, actually, the one thing I have to give you the most amount of credit for is that Mozart. When I'm on Long Island, oftentimes people say, Mark, the ruler guy. You actually said ruler. And so I really love you. Anyway, some people don't like that joke, and I thought it is what it is. So, firstly, thanks for inviting me here today. And I'm excited to have an hour with all of you to dive deeply into this work. So I think we're just going to jump right in. I always start with resources because if you want to get free articles, if you want to take a free course on emotion regulation, I know that high school peers are just beginning their people work with us, but those are websites for all that kind of stuff. And now I'll begin with the vision. So the vision of our center is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. Just take a moment to think about that. To use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. We're going to begin with a little instruction on emotion. So, I have like a whole little thing I can walk on here. This is cool. I feel like I should have worn a better outfit. Some of you might be familiar with the mood meter. It's deceptively simple, especially among all of us, right? We're adults. We're highly educated people. You're going to make me look at a box with 4 squares, 4 colors. But as you're going to see in a moment, we're going to go a little deeper. So on the x-axis, it says the word pleasantness. All of you woke up this morning. You knew it was a day there was going to be a guest speaker. Some guy, Mark, from Connecticut, is going to come talk about feelings for an hour. Some of you might have woken up and been like, I want to pull the covers over my head. Like, I don't want, this is an hour of my time talking about feelings. Others of you woke up this morning and you're like, oh my God, an hour to reflect on my feelings. There could be nothing better in life than that. Plus 5, like you're looking at me and thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I want Mark to move in. It could be my personal emotion coach every morning. 0, you're kind of like, I could be here, I could be teaching, I could be with my family. It's all the same. And here, you're thinking this is the worst experience of your entire life. So where are you right now? It's here. Interestingly enough, people think that our brains were made or built for thinking. And the truth is, that came much later on. Our brains were actually built to thrive and survive. Emotions are more primitive than cognition. When you wake up in the morning, when you enter a classroom, when you walk down the streets, you're making appraisals of everything that you're seeing. Your brain is making predictions. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be unsafe? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel uncomfortable? That's what this x-axis is all about. On the y-axis, it says the word energy. So everyone here is alive because you're here, and you have some degree of activation in your body. Now, the technical term in psychology is arousal. We're going to pull that out of our school-based program. Is that why teachers walk around like, how aroused are you today? So, not going to work. So, energy, activation levels. -5. Your energy is so low, you just want to, it's like the Wicked Witch and the Wizard of Oz. You're like melting into the earth. +5, you can't contain your energy. You've got so much energy you can't contain it. But my observation in this room, we're not there yet. All right. So now we cross our 2 axes and we create our mood meter. Emotional. We've got 4 quadrants, yellow, red, blue, and green. So I want to know my audience. How many of you are somewhere in the yellow today? High energy and pleasant. Okay. How many of you are in the green? You're pleasant, but your energy is kind of low. A lot of green. Anybody in the blue or red today? Yeah. Notice the reaction. We're laughing at people who are angry and depressed. It's a good sign, Superintendent. Thanks for inviting me. Now, more seriously, right, we do have this notion in our heads, right, that there's something like wrong with the red and blue. But I can tell you right now, personally, I'm 52. I've been living in the red probably 49 years. I was born worrying. I worry about why I worry. Anyone else like that? Am I the only one? I even worry about why I worry about why I worry. It's ridiculous. But as we're going to see today, there's nothing wrong with red and blue. Actually, they're adaptive emotions. As a matter of fact, from an emotional intelligence perspective, there is no such thing as a bad emotion. All emotions are information. What I'd like you to do now, before we move forward, is I want you to convert your plot or your color to a specific feeling word. Okay? You got 3 seconds. 2, 1, freeze. Now I need an honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble pinpointing the precise word? Hands up. Hands up high. Like stretch it out, please. Hold it up. Look around the room, everybody. So 90% of the high school educators here struggle to find words to describe their feelings. I'm going to ask you to take just 30 seconds with someone next to you and become a researcher at our center and generate some hypotheses. Why would it be a room filled with highly educated high school educators and people online and other grade levels? Why would it be so challenging to find the words? Go to work. 30 seconds.
I'm sore.
Okay. So what do we think? What's your hypothesis? It's several. Just give me your favorite, your top one. So your brains are so overloaded that you just can't even find the word. Okay, thank you. Other hypotheses? Yeah. Interesting. How are you feeling? Running. Ready. Teaching. All right, we're going to work on that, just so you know. There's hope. Other hypotheses? Yeah. We're not conditioned. Safer to be in the thinking mode than the feeling mode, especially for a guy, right? Ask me how I'm feeling if you don't mind. Good. I mean, most guys don't even say how are you feeling, right? They say, how's it going? Good. Ask me again, how am I feeling? Say it again. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I just took a red-eye flight in from California. I feel completely bloated. I changed my clothes in the bathroom of the flight. I was like, what are you going to wear to this thing? It looked like crap. I'm kind of tired, a little irritable, overwhelmed, and cautiously optimistic. And she's like, good luck. But when you think about it, good job. Oh, I have a good emotion vocabulary, that I can guarantee you. But the question here is, like, what do we do with that information? Think about it. Do we use that information, or do we, like, try not to even ask the question? Because a lot, it's loaded, the question, how are you feeling? Number one, if I ask you how you're feeling, I'm expecting, potentially, that you'll respond, but also, the person I'm asking has to feel safe to tell me the truth. How many of you here have ever kind of lied about how you felt? We all do it all the time, right? We're educators. We have to fake it all the time. right? Especially our poor kindergarten teachers. I just, God bless people who teach kindergarten. Good morning! Every day. I mean, how they can ever be in a relationship bewilders me. Right? Because it's like, how do you like not, you can't ever be not happy. I mean, it's not human. It's a problem. I mean, think about it. It's difficult. It's called emotional labor. It's a lot of work. Superintendent, we got to tough. You're a tough guy. So, how are you feeling? I ask you that question. A, you have to believe that I care, or you're not going to tell me the truth. B, you have to have a language, which we just showed. Among adults, we struggle with the word. So now, can you even articulate really what you're feeling? And then when I share what's going on with me, I have to believe that you're going to support me. Otherwise, why am I going to tell you the truth? Does that make any sense? And so I think we've gone on through life. Parents tell me this all the time. I don't even ask my kids how they feel in the morning because like I got to go to work. I mean, think about that. I'm not going to ask my kid how he's feeling because I got to go to work. Because what happens at 7:45 in the morning when you're out going out the door? Your kid says, "I'm feeling despair," which many kids do feel that way right now. All right, so we're here for about an hour, and I just have another question for you. How many of you at some point during my presentation are going to get distracted? Be honest. Okay, this is great. Farmingdale, I have a new logo for you guys. Farmingdale, the home of emotionally illiterate, attention deficit disorder teachers. And so you're not sure how you feel and you can't pay attention. This is wonderful. I tell you, it makes my career worth it. So I guess my question for you then is like, what's your strategy? I mean, think about your students. They got to be present all day long. I mean, think of it. So from the time they get here in the morning until the end of the school day, we're asking them to be engaged. And you're telling me you can't even get through my 1 hour lecture. So what are the strategies that you'll use to get the most out of this morning? Who has a strategy? Nobody. So like that's why you're here. Anyone have a strategy? Yes, over there. You're going to stand during my presentation. What's that? All right, thank you. Standing is great. Yes. You're going to take notes. Allow yourself to be distracted for a minute. How often can you allow that? Every 5 minutes, I'm giving myself the permission to be distracted. Just kidding. All right, other strategies? Yeah. Tapping into the student's interests. Let me ask another question. How many of you during the pandemic had a moment where you just kind of lost it? Anyone? You just sort of like, I give up, I'm done. Like you just can't take it anymore. I had a number of those moments. My talking about March 13th a minute ago. So on March 1st, my mother-in-law flew in from Panama to come to a family event. And there were no flights back to Panama until September. And so by April, we're like, oh, it's fun to have her. She loves to make me breakfast. I love it. Nothing like having a mother-in-law who likes to make me breakfast. And then it became May. She didn't want to go outside, ever. She wanted to stand in the kitchen and stare at me all day long. She would ask me 3-4 times a day, what do you want for dinner? What do you want for dinner? What do you want for dinner? And I was like, not the same chicken. Not the same chicken. Not the same chicken. And then it got progressively much more difficult. And then one night, we blew up at the kitchen table at dinner, and she looked at me and she said, are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? And I looked at her and I said, not tonight. It was a disaster. Like, a disaster. Like, how many of you ever said something that you really regret? I had that night. And I'm like, I am the freaking director of the freaking Center for Freaking Emotion. And I was so pissed. I went back, I went up to my bedroom like, Mark, like, what just happened? Why were you not able to regulate? And I made all the excuses in the world. It's a pandemic, I'm working from home. Right? We all can, there's lots of reasons to explain why we don't, or why we're not our best selves. And then the harder part came, which is I had to get up in the morning and look at her again. And then the question was, would I have the courage to apologize? Would I have the courage to repair our relationship, to figure out the way to move forward? And it was hard, really hard work. So I'm going to ask everyone to take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. Just bring yourself back into the moment. Before I move forward, I want to just ask you a quick question. How many of you feel like in your own personal education from preschool to high school, even college, that you had an adequate education to support you in building a solid emotion vocabulary and evidence-based, research-based strategies to help you manage the full range of emotions? You're like, what is he talking about? It's interesting, isn't it? Now, how many of you believe that your children, your own children, your students, yourselves, that you would be, maybe this last 2 years would have been a little easier had you had better strategies to manage? Anyone willing to accept that? I think so. And there's good reason to support it. So this here cheat sheet is actually, this is from my book called Permission to Feel. This is the inside cheat sheet of the mood meter. There are 17,000 words just in English that we could use to describe how we feel. Just the top 100, just to get you started. Now, there is so much research to support why social and emotional learning matters. Most teachers, when you ask them, they say, yes, this really matters. When you ask parents, they think it's important. Superintendents and principals all believe it matters. But the challenge with that is not that it's not a good thing that people believe it. The problem is that beliefs don't necessarily turn into action. And so what we see here is mental health in America pre-COVID. Look at that. I mean, 25% of children having adjustment problems, 45% have an adverse trauma experience, at least one. Anxiety. College students where I teach at Yale, 50% of my students are seeking treatment for mental health challenges. Not 5%, 50%. It's been a 20% increase in treatment for mental health problems for the last 6 years. Depression. Unfortunately, suicide rates have gone up. During COVID, we found that teenagers just lost their confidence. 24% increase in children going to the emergency room for problematic mental health. 31% increase for teenagers. Adults, 8 times more likely compared to 2020 to report serious mental distress. Another area of research of mine is bullying. I'm 52 now. I hated school. I was actually a failing student. I was a C&D student growing up. And I thought all this work on bullying prevention, SEL, would have decreased them. But the truth is, about a third of kids report being bullied every day in school, whether it be in person, face-to-face, or cyberbullying. You would think by now we would be able to reduce the bias and a lot of the racism in our society, but it hasn't happened yet. Just this one study. Black male students are 3.8 times more likely to receive out-of-school time suspension compared to their white counterparts. And last year alone, anti-black racism was at the top, anti-Asian hate crimes, anti-Semitism. 40% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide last year. So there's a missing piece. And then when you look at engagement and burnout, we see among leaders, teachers, other educators, people are stressed out more than they've ever been before. So when we get granularity, we see that the top emotions during COVID that kids felt were frustration, boredom, anxiety. The top emotions that educators felt in our national study of 27,000 teachers, anxiety popped up as number 1. Back about 3 years ago, we did a national study of teachers. It was like 50-50, 50% pleasant emotions, 50% unpleasant emotions. Now it's 2/3, 1/3. principles of schools, 1,000 principles in a national study, anxiety, emotion. So there's how we feel, and then there's something that's, I think, important, which is how we want to feel. So in our studies, we ask people, what are the emotions that you want to experience more? Take a guess what the number one hoped for emotion is among educators. It's appreciated. And I don't think we can take this lightly. So just take a moment to think about that. Appreciated. Also, close ties, valued, confident, supported, happy. Now, one of the challenges I think with these data or these findings that we can all go into the blaming game. Well, if this happened, if you did this, if you said that, then I would feel appreciated. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. One of the things I want to encourage you to think about is being the first. It's really cool to be the first to show your appreciation. And I'm just going to let you know that the research on gratitude is not overrated. It's just not overrated. It changes your biochemistry, it changes the biochemistry of the people that you're interacting with. And so we can all wait and wait and wait. But remember, just like stress, which is contagious, so I'll repeat myself, stress is contagious. A stressed out principal is a stressed out school, a stressed out educator is a stressed out classroom. And what's interesting about stress contagion is that it happens subconsciously. What do I mean by that? What I mean is this. I walk around, my energy level looks frenetic. I'm kind of saying things without being conscious of it that make people see I'm stressed. My students are absorbing that energy. They start feeling what I'm feeling, but they can't identify where it's coming from. So that's the power of contagion. Now, the opposite is true too for positive emotions, like contentment. You can spread the power of appreciation by being the first to show your appreciation. And all of a sudden, other people start showing their gratitude, and all of a sudden, you have a spiral of pleasant emotions. So, take home for today, number one, is just figure out simple little ways to say, I noticed you, or I care, or show your gratitude for something. It's really funny. I did a study during the pandemic on gratitude. I was really interested in what do people think about in America during a pandemic around gratitude. And I was kind of bored with the findings, to be honest with you. So number one was I'm grateful for my finances, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for all the things that we should be grateful for on a daily basis. But I was really taken aback by the fact that no one said something like, I'm grateful for all the healthcare workers who are putting themselves at risk every single day of their lives to make sure our nation thrives. I'm really grateful for teachers who are figuring out how to deal with this craziness and give children the best possible education. I'm grateful for the grocery store clerks who be in front of strangers every single day of their lives. The UPS delivery person. And so I think if there's one thing that can come out of this pandemic, it's just being a little bit more grateful. Grateful for the things we have, grateful for the things we don't have. I'll share with you just a side story about this. So my family is also in the film business, and we were making a film during the pandemic, a documentary. It's called 2020 Americans. And we drove around the United States for 8 months filming people across America about their experiences during the pandemic, from very, very rural areas to deep city. And the documentary is focused on politics, racism, immigration, and the lives of people. One of the episodes is about immigrants in New York City. And we were filming in Queens, New York during the pandemic, where there were hundreds of thousands of people, like literally hundreds of thousands of people who were homeless, temporary housing, and no food. Most of immigrants who work in New York are in the restaurant business. They're working in restaurants. Restaurants were closed for how many months? So we're filming this day. And there are lines. I mean, you just can't even imagine these lines waiting to get some food. And I'm listening to the person who was calling out the names of people who had registered to get their food. And the person calls out a name, whatever it was. No one shows up. Now, Mark, who's like Mr. Shrewd, I'm thinking, why isn't somebody lying? Like, just go lie. Tell them that's your name. Like, go get your food. You're homeless and you're starving. I can't understand why you're not taking the food. And I actually went up to a woman, and I speak Spanish, and I asked her in Spanish. I said, why aren't, the woman is not here. Just go grab it. And she looked at me and she said, I can't do that because I belong to somebody. I mean, think about that for a minute. It's like you have nothing. And the woman was not willing to take the food of someone else. And I think it's a reality check for all of us, because sometimes we get lost in our own craziness during pandemics. Does that resonate with anybody? We just get lost in our own craziness, and we don't just take a breath and just realize, like, we've got a lot going for us. We really do. And there's a lot more we can do for other people. And the reason why I focus on this gratitude and appreciation so much is that there's so much research to show that when you give, not only do you help the other, but you feel better too. Because givers are happier than takers. Now, we go to this mood meter, and we see that, in the real world, we've got a lot of feelings on the left side. People are asking, I want to be more yellow and green. And it brings up another important question that we have to focus on, which is, what's the goal? Like, what do we do with our feelings? Do we try to get rid of our red and blue emotions? I can tell you, as I said earlier, I've been trying to do that my whole life. It hasn't worked. Because you are who you are. And, when I was in my 25th year as a professor, I decided to finally, write a book. And I wanted to explain to the real world, what the science shows and what I learned running around the world. And what I've learned is that it really starts with this basic principle of permission to feel. So none of you really know me at all. I'm just a professor guy who's now stopping. I took my emotion revolution bus and parked it in Farmingdale today, and I got off my bus, and I'm trying to get all of you on the bus. And I recognize that people are in different places of readiness for this work. It makes sense. But I would like to just share with you a little bit about my story to make it relevant to why I'm here. So, I live a very great life now. I'm married. I have a fantastic mother-in-law. She's back in Panama. And may never visit us again. It's all good. But I grew up in New Jersey. Two parents who loved me. I had a mother who had terrible anxiety, however. Just terrible anxiety. She was always having nervous breakdowns as I was growing up. And I had a father who was a quote-unquote tough guy from the Bronx, New York. And I learned very early in life, don't talk to mommy about my feelings because she's going to have a nervous breakdown. If I tell anything to my father, he's just going to tell me to toughen up. Now, with that said, I also had some pretty serious trauma in my life. Very sadly, I was abused by a neighbor from when I was 6 years old until I was 10 years old. Probably the most painful thing a child can go through is abuse by an adult. And I share that with you because that adult basically threatened me and said if I shared anything that was happening to me, I would be harmed in my family. And so you can imagine what happens to a child's brain and body when they're in those circumstances, right? Your feelings are there. Disgust, hatred, fear, anger. But they're trapped inside your body. They can't go anywhere. They go other places though, like eating disorder, self-hatred, low self-esteem, and the list goes on. And I was blessed in life, even with my abuse, because I had an uncle who was a middle school teacher from the Catskill Mountains in New York State, who happened to be going to graduate school in my hometown. And my Uncle Marvin, who was a band leader at night, he was a trumpet player at the Concord Hotel up in the Catskills back in the heyday, and was a sixth grade social studies teacher by day, who was writing a curriculum by some wave of a magic wand to teach kids how to understand history through feelings. And we sat in the backyard of my home, and one day he looked at me and he said, "Mark, how are you feeling?" But he did it in a way that no one had ever done it before. He did it with a twinkle in his eyes, with a vocal tone that was welcoming, with a facial expression that just said, "Tell me everything." And that day was the day I disclosed everything that was happening to me. And he didn't say, "Get some grip," or "Toughen up," or "Don't tell me I'll have a nervous breakdown." He looked at me and he goes, "We're going to get through this together." And I will tell you that that one day of my life is the reason why I'm here today. There's this one adult, right, who gave me the permission to be who I was. Now, I recognize that we have people of every background here, different stories. And I also realize that, my story may be extreme. But I don't think it is in terms of the reality that most of us feel like we've been living alone with our feelings our whole lives. That our society has made it difficult for us to really be our true, full feeling selves. Now, I wonder also, did any of you have an Uncle Mark? Was there an adult in your life who played that role for you? Can you think of a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, a coach, an educator, someone who just, for whatever reason, they allowed you and gave you the opportunity to be your true, full feeling self? And as you think about these people, or that person, what might be their characteristics? Even if you didn't have that person. Just take a moment and think about that. What are the characteristics of the people, of the educators that give us that permission to feel? And like everything I do, I did a study on this. And I asked about 100,000 people across the world. And this is what I learned. Here are the characteristics. Empathic, compassionate, non-judgmental, supportive, validating, accepting, encouraging, not a fixer, open, patient. So question number one. And by the way, you can be your own Uncle Marvin. So have you been your own Uncle Marvin over the last year and a half? Have you been non-judgmental and compassionate to yourself? It's hard when we're activated, when we're stressed, when we're worried, when we're overwhelmed to be Uncle Marvins, because we're in fight mode. It's the reason why I was a failing student up until high school. I couldn't process anything. I was worried about survival. I wasn't caring about any of the content. What I find is that if we create learning environments in schools and districts where people have these kinds of characteristics, everybody flourishes. It's kind of remarkable, really. So something else interesting happened. So I go on this tour when my book first came out, and all of a sudden I never had shared my own view story. I just never felt safe and comfortable to talk about it in public. It was only when I turned 50 I decided, finally I'm going to be my true self, publicly. Because people ask me all the time, like, why do you do this work? Why do you do this work? And I used to say, I was a terrible student and I was bullied. But the real reason I do this work is because I was robbed of my emotional life as a child. And it had tremendous impact on my health and development. And I can't imagine a child having to go through that in life. So I shared the story about my Uncle Marvin in this public presentation in Westchester. And I said, does anyone have an Uncle Marvin? And this one guy stood up, he was like, are you talking about Marvin Moore, the 6th grade social studies teacher from Monticello, New York? I said, yes. He's like, your Uncle Marvin was my Uncle Marvin. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, your uncle was my 6th grade social studies teacher 45 years ago. I'm like, you're kidding me. I said, I've got to do my presentation. Can we talk afterward? And so I did a 45-minute interview with this man. I was blown away by what he remembered about my uncle, who he had as a 6th grade teacher 45 years ago. He remembered everything about his instruction. He remembered the way he greeted people. He remembered the way he weaved in emotion with history. I mean, he told me everything. It was just mind-blowing. But then he said something to me at the end. He looked at me and he goes, well, Mark, it's clear the impact that your uncle had on your career. He'd be so proud of you. My uncle passed away about 4 years ago. And then he looked at me and he goes, I'm just curious. For whom are you an Uncle Mark? And in that moment, I realized, I've gotten a lot out of this, a whole career in my wellness, but I'm a workaholic. I'm like publications and running a center and running around doing presentations. And I realized that I'm not living it either. I may be researching it, but I'm not living it. And so my hope is that we can all live it, because it's the lived experience that transforms lives. It's not the research. The only reason why I do research is to convince the naysayers. Because intuitively we know this works. Intuitively we know it works. But there are a lot of people that they're data people. I'm a data guy too. And so what I'm here to share with you is that there is endless research to support all the things I've been talking about. Emotions matter for 5 critical reasons in life. The first is attention, memory, and learning. We learn what we care about. We learn what we care about. If there's no care, there's no learning. Think about it. As I said earlier, when you're in survival mode, you can't be in learning mode. The same neurons are firing. The second is decision making. Anyone here make a bad decision during the last couple of months? Anyone want to just get it off their chest and come on stage and share it publicly? So we've all made bad choices. We think we're rational creatures, though. We think cognitively, I made this choice. I'm here to tell you that your emotions are underneath all of your decisions. Here's an interesting study that I did with educators. I randomly assigned middle school teachers to think about a good day and a bad day. It's easy. Think about a good day, think about a bad day. Think about a good day, think about a bad day. And I gave every one of those educators the exact same essay to evaluate. And the research question was, would there be a difference in the grades based on the mood of the educator? And everybody's like, yes. But think about what you're agreeing to. You're agreeing that, like, if you're in a bad mood, your students fail this. Like, that's not really cool. Right? Mood should not vary the way you evaluate, but it does. As a matter of fact, there were 1 to 2 full grade differences in the grades of those essays, just based on the mood of the teacher. And when we asked the teachers at the end of the study, do you believe that how you felt had any influence over the grade that you provided? 90% denied it. They said, no way. Like, I grade papers all the time. Like, what does it matter what mood I'm in? What that tells us is that how we feel subconsciously filters the way we see the world. And it influences the choices we make and the judgments we make. Anyone know the antidote to that? What's the antidote? It's so ridiculously simple, you won't even believe it. You just check in with your feelings. Before you make a big choice, before you have an important phone call, before you have to say something to your spouse, a student that's going to be difficult, you just say, Mark, how are you feeling right now? Oh, I'm pissed off at my partner because we had a huge fight this morning. Oh, I attribute the emotion to its actual cause. It no longer has that subconscious influence over my future. Relationship quality. Do you know that the mere presence of an Uncle Marvin is a strategy? Does anyone here have someone in their lives right now that just being with them alone helps you to deactivate? Just being with that person. They don't have to say or do anything. Think about that for a minute. Just the presence of someone with these characteristics is a strategy. The opposite is true too. Without looking to your left or your right, or at your superintendent or leadership team. Has anyone here ever worked with someone who was really difficult? Like really hard to be around, like just like you have to walk in eggshells, you gotta be careful what you say. I have a cousin like that. She drives me out of my freaking mind. She came to visit me. I moved to the countryside of Connecticut recently. I love living there. It's like the new life I have. I don't even know. I actually have no identity anymore. And there's a cute coffee shop in town, and like they're like, "Would you like a free refill?" And I'm like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Look, it's like sandwiches are half the price they are everywhere else." And so I bring my cousin there, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be here all the time. She's like, "It's nice here. But there's an underlying anger." I'm like, "Yeah, it's you." It's like, we call that projection in my department. Like, you're the problem. I didn't say that, but I thought it. I wanted to say it. But she's my uncle's daughter, so I can't do that. So, relationship quality. Emotions are inherent in our relationship quality. Our facial expressions, our body language, our vocal tone send signals. Approach avoid, approach avoid, approach avoid, approach avoid. Think about that for a minute. Every facial expression you make, all of your body language, every day is sending signals. Approach me, avoid me. I got more power, we're equal. Fourth, physical and mental health. Here's something interesting. The culture and climate of your schools is going to drive your cortisol levels and stress levels, is going to drive whether or not you sleep well at night and whether or not you have mental health challenges. I've already shown that in research. So we can't deny that our schools have emotions also. Finally, performance and creativity. It's very interesting because I grew up, neither one of my parents had a college education. I didn't know what Yale University was growing up. And now I've been a professor there for 20 years. And I still have imposter syndrome. I still feel like my parents didn't read Shakespeare to me. I mean, these like lunches with people that talk about like their political government families, power families. I'm like, hey. And I have no embarrassment about my childhood in terms of, my father was an air conditioner repairman. And God bless him, and I know how to fix my air conditioner. But I can't relate a lot to the people around me. And interestingly enough, when I got to my university, I just had this mindset that every one of my students was going to be a superstar, and I was going to be intimidated. And I was for a little bit. And then I got to know my students. And I realized that most of my students tell me the following thing, that they feel like they've been manufactured. Literally, they say, "Professor Brackett, I'm manufactured. I don't know who I am. I was told to play an instrument that no one ever heard of before to get into Yale. I was told to do this, I was told to do this, and now I'm here and I just don't know who I am." Think about that for a minute. And then they resist the emotion work because they think that their brain power got them into Yale. I had one student literally a couple years ago said, "Professor Brackett, I didn't need emotional intelligence to get into Yale." And I said, "Well, you're going to need to get out." He's like, "No one's going to want to hire you, just to let you know. And if you ask me to write a letter of recommendation, it's going to be honest. I'm not one of those people who just bullshits." And so, over and over again, what I find is that people don't value this work. They don't see its importance. And yet, like some people, I think the goal is to get into a place like Yale or whatever these good universities, and many of them obviously. But I don't think that's really the goal. I know that maybe it looks good. But the truth is, what I think all of you want are kids who have purpose and passion, who have a strong identity, who have a sense of wellness, who can build and maintain healthy relationships, who can make sound decisions. Like if you're a parent, you don't think, oh my God, my ultimate goal in life is for my kid to get the highest SAT scores. Nobody thinks that way. We've just created a system that only values those things in terms of moving forward in your career. When, interestingly enough, the corporations that I work with now, they say things like, we actually don't want these students anymore. We can't stand them. They're so freaking narcissistic. They don't know how to be a team player. They don't know how to deal with feedback. They don't like to work collaboratively. So, as you heard in my opening from your superintendent, my goal is to help everyone to be an emotion scientist as opposed to an emotion judge. Why? Well, the emotion scientist is open and curious and reflective, right? Views emotions as information, is in learner mode, wants to get granular and specific. Not really sure how I'm feeling, but I'm going to look for that word. And when they fail at dealing with their feelings, they don't say, I'm a loser, I suck at this, I'm never going to get any better. They say, you know what? Today was a rough day. I'm going to think about what activated me. I'm going to try to figure out a strategy that's going to work best for me the next time. I work with a lot of emotion judges at my university. People think I'm a soft scientist because they have soft skills. Think about that. Critical, closed, ignores emotions, views emotions as error. The best example I have, I gave a speech for the surgery department. Right? These are supposed to be the brightest crayons in the box, right? Brain surgeons. I get done with my presentation, and one of the leaders of this department stands up and looks at me and goes, what happened to our university? It's like, oh shit, where's this going? And he's like, this is Yale, Mark. We produce Nobel laureates, not nice people. And I said, does anyone else have a different perspective on my presentation? Literally, someone else stood up and he goes, here's what I learned, Mark. Sometimes you have to be an asshole. Because the people who report you just shut up and do exactly what you tell them to do. Now, at this point, I'm like, where am I? And I look over at the dean. I'm like, are we making a movie here? Like, what's going on here? I really am perplexed. I thought the dean was going to just start crying hysterically. And he goes, this is why I should come speak with us. Now, I know the people in those departments because I am a professor there. The people who work with those people hate their jobs. Who wants to be around the person who's critical, closed, who ignores emotions? Remember the famous quote from Teddy Roosevelt. Anyone know it? People don't care what you know until they know you care. Right? It doesn't matter what you know. Knowledge can be accumulated. So finally, we have these skills of emotional intelligence, the ruler skills. Recognizing our own and others' emotions, being aware. Understanding where those feelings are coming from. Labeling those feelings with the most precise words. Knowing how and when to express those emotions with all people and how to regulate them. Let's think about this for a minute. Recognizing emotions, being self-aware, being socially aware. How am I feeling? How are you feeling? We're going to do a little study of that right now. So I'm going to display emotion. I'm going to use the leadership team over here. All of you, look at me. I'm going to display an emotion, and you're going to not say anything until I ask you to. Okay, what did you see? Calm, judgmental, content, relaxed, snarky, confident. Confident. All right, so say it again. Calm, judgmental. Wait a minute, I'm like one guy here. I'm not like civil, right? So you think I'm like, look at it all. You think I'm calm and you think I'm snobby. What'd you say? Judgmental. Sorry. You said that. So snobby, judgmental, calm, content. Who's right? Everybody's right? So that means I have no self? I mean, think about how many errors we make on a daily basis reading people. Because we're born as emotion judges. And we have to step back and not make the quick assumption that we know how people feel. There are many biases, including racial bias, including gender stereotyping, and others, when we're reading people's facial expressions. Only way to really know someone is to get to know them really, really well, and then you can read them better, or you're going to ask them how they're feeling. Because here I am, I was trying to be calm. I was like, oh, you think I'm snarky. So imagine I worked for this guy. I'm walking down the hall, I'm like, good morning. He's like, asshole. And I'm just trying to be a nice guy. I didn't get a raise this year because you misread my freaking facial expression. Do you see what I'm getting at? We got to be careful. Understanding emotion. Where are these feelings coming from? Why am I angry? Why am I disappointed? By the way, what's the difference psychologically between anger and disappointment? The winner of this gets a free signed book in gold ink. Anger and disappointment, the psychological difference. Who's got it? Anyone? Yes. And then you. Disappointment has an expectation on somebody else, and anger comes from your own. Doesn't have to involve someone else. What do you think? So you're close. You get page 2. All right, yes. What do you think? Yeah. Control. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's imagine this. I come in from the playground, off whatever it is, like, I hate this school. How am I feeling? Frustrated. Angry. So what happened again? You all became emotion judges again. You have no clue. I could have been bullied on the playground. I feel tremendous shame, but I'm a boy who just doesn't want to look like I feel shame. It's like, I hate school. But deep inside, I'm feeling terrible shame. Point is that behavior also does not equal emotion. We interpret behavior all the time. My parents said, "What do you think you are talking to me that way? Get to your room. Wait till your father gets home." Meanwhile, I was being bullied, and I was coming home not knowing how to deal with it because I couldn't talk about it. I hate school. Go to your room. Thank you. Wait till your father gets home. Can't wait for Dad to get home. He's gonna love talking about feelings. No, it was a nightmare. So, point being, to understand emotions, we have to be able to define them carefully. Anger is about injustice. How could you say that? It's when someone does something that's unjust. Disappointment is about an unmet expectation. Everything's legit. It just didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Now the question is, does it matter? Does it matter? Does it matter that we teach ourselves and our children how to differentiate anger from disappointment? Everybody just nod, please. Otherwise, I have no purpose in life. So the answer is yes, because the strategy to help a child deal with anger and disappointment will be completely different. How you help a child manage their disappointment will be completely different than how you help them to deal with their perceptions of injustice. This is why we have to understand feelings and label them properly. Decision. Expressing emotions. I can ask all of you right now, do you feel like you have the permission to express your true feelings at home and at work? Can you be your truthful feeling self? And until the answer is yes, then we're not doing all the work we need to do. There's so many rules with expression. There's personal rules. I'm an introvert. People think I'm outgoing. I can't stand people. And I can't wait to go home. Like, I don't bother people. But people think I'm outgoing because I do public speaking. Yeah, there'll be no questions. I will be leaving alone. But my point behind that is that how I express and how you express might be different based on my personality, your personality, based on my cultural rules. I come from a neurotic Jewish family, right? That's different. It's different than maybe a Korean family or a Chinese family or a family from Central or South America. There's different rules around expression. Eye contact is different. Touch is different. But here's the interesting thing about it all. There's no correctness. There's no right way. Unfortunately, we in America have a belief system that everything, the way we do things, is the way to do them. I gave a talk on Wall Street was the best. But it's a big, fancy firm. The guy comes in his Versace suit. I loved it. He's like, "Hello, Dr. Brackett." He's like, reaches out and he shakes my hand like I thought it was like John Wayne. And he's like, "Hi." I'm like, "Hi." Yeah. Like, I gotta get testosterone injections before these presentations. Like, I don't know if I can handle this. It's like, ooh. And then I go to Korea, where I teach a martial art called Hapkido. It's Korean. And Waksan. Like, who's right? There's no right or wrong. If you're the curious, compassionate emotion scientist, you're in learning mode all the time. You're not in judging mode all the time. Finally, emotion regulation. At the top of the hierarchy of emotional intelligence. The strategies that we use to manage the full range of emotions. Let me ask everyone to take a nice long inhale. Can I go 3 minutes over? Sorry. I apologize, sort of. I want to wrap up with some strategies for all of you. Starts with permission to feel. There's no bad emotion. Emotions are experiences like anything in the world. When we're highly activated, we have to learn how to manage our physiology. You've got to learn how to manage your breathing. You've got to learn how to manage your heart rate. Because once that gets elevated, you can't think anymore. It just makes it impossible to problem solve. You've got to learn how to get it. You've got to learn how to just manage your actual body. From sleep to nutrition to exercise. All three of those factors contribute to your ability to regulate effectively. Ever notice if you don't get enough sleep, you're more irritable? You don't have enough carbohydrate in your system, you can't make clear decisions? You've got to work on your self-talk. I'm convinced that we live in a society of gaslighting. Everybody's being gaslit. Everybody's trying to convince everybody else the reality they want for them. It starts very early. Very, very early. As a matter of fact, my niece, who is this beautiful young girl adopted from Guatemala, in kindergarten was gaslit, was bullied. Somebody came up to her and said, "You're a different color than your mother." That's disgusting. At 5. That one moment in that little girl's life changed her life forever. She's 17 now. She still remembers that day. Because someone else was trying to define her self-esteem. Someone else was trying to define her value, her identity. How much time do we spend helping kids form their own identities? Have that deep level of self-acceptance. Moving the self-criticism to self-compassion. It's life's work. We've got to become those Uncle Marvins so that people feel safe and heard and connected. We have to remember that we are co-regulating emotions. So as your presenter today, I'm the one standing, I'm the one speaking mostly. Like my energy, my feelings, my facial expression is contagious, whether you're conscious of it or not. So as leaders, as teachers, you are co-responsible for the feeling states of everyone in your environment. And then finally, you got to just do things you enjoy. You just do. You got to find time to play because life is too short. So let's put it all together. Final slide. 1. Permiso para sentir. 2. All emotions are information. 3. Maybe this year we can all strive to be those emotion scientists and let's put our emotion judges in the parking lot a little bit. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that developing these skills is very effortful. Think about it. When you're on vacation at the beach, who cares if you have emotional intelligence? It's when someone kicks the sand in your face. That's when you get activated. That's when you need these skills. I think COVID is like getting the sand kicked in our face. We've been activated in ways that we're not prepared. And we just haven't had the prevention training to support us in dealing with all the feelings that we're having. Finally, if you don't focus at a systemic level, you're not going to get the best change. I never understood why social and emotional learning is a program. I've been fighting that model my whole career. It's like kit that people buy and do to kids. If you're going to do this well, it really has to be about infusing the principles of emotion science. It's the way leaders lead, teachers teach, students learn, families parent, bus drivers drive the buses, cafeteria workers. It's got to be, everyone should have the opportunity to build the skills. So, as I wrap up my time with you, I just want to say one last thing. Oftentimes, a lot of people come up to me at the end of the presentation and say, but, Mark, thank you for sharing your story, but, with all the trauma, look at it, you made it. And firstly, that's complicated. You made it. I don't know how to define that, to be honest with you. But I think most importantly is that there's so many assumptions, again, in that. When I disclosed my abuse to my uncle, my father almost killed the neighbor. He literally went with a bat to try to kill this person. My mother had a complete nervous breakdown, almost hospitalized because she couldn't believe that her child had that happen. And with all of that anger and all that anxiety, they knew one thing: get Mark a therapist, get Mark a therapist, get Mark a therapist. They knew that. God bless them for getting me that psychologist when I was a kid to help me change my thinking, not blame myself for being a victim. God bless Uncle Marvin for giving me the language to talk about my feelings and the courage to speak about them. God bless my martial arts teachers who took me on. As a kid, it was very awkward. I ended up making a career out of the martial arts. God bless the college that I went to, graduate school, in the last 25 years of my life, healing, writing, and doing. And so I end by asking you to just take a moment and think about the children that you serve here in Farmingdale. Just take a nice long inhale, please. And do a walkthrough of your school. And ask yourself, does every kid that goes to school in this district have an open heart? Does every kid get the opportunity to develop the skills that they need to achieve their dreams in life? Not just the academic skills, but these social emotional skills that are underneath to support them in having wellness, building good relationships, making the best decisions, and having their dreams come true. I want to end by just saying thank you for inviting me. And I want to end by saying I've come to the conclusion from both the research and being in the real world that it really is our moral obligation to ensure that every kid has the permission to feel. What that means is that it really is our moral obligation as the adults who are raising and teaching kids to be the best possible role models for them. Thank you so much.